Okay, great. I think we are live. Yes, we are live. Great. I think, hello everyone. Welcome to our live. Thank you so much for joining. We're very excited to get started with this session. And yeah, thank you for joining us this evening, morning, afternoon, night, depending on which part of the world you're tuning in from. Today, we will be discussing our latest research brief, which is called 30 Years After Beijing, Mapping the Progress of Women's Political Leadership in South Asia. Yeah, this has been a very exciting project, and we're really looking forward to sharing some of our experiences, some of our findings. So bear with us. Thank you so much. Can we go on to the next slide, please? So before we get into our brief, let me tell you a little bit about CGAP, or the Center for Gender and Politics. We are the first and only think tank that specializes in gender and politics with a regional focus on South Asia. Over the past 5 years, we have engaged over 140 volunteers from over 13 countries who have joined us in this mission to further gender diversity within South Asian politics. I would now like to take a second to introduce our research team that worked on this particular brief, some of whom you can see have joined us on this call. So we have Ranjini, who is a seasoned policy professional, having worked with organizations including the Quantum Hub, EY, and the Udeti Foundation. She also has an LLM from LSE. We have Dr. Rajeshwari, who is an SDG consultant with a specialization in SDG 5, which is gender equality. And she's also equipped with a diverse skill set, including strategic communication, mixed methods research, and policy development and advocacy. We have Tapakshi, who has a background in IR and politics and has worked across diverse organizations, again, including EY, UN Women, and the Observer Research Foundation. We have another researcher called Kamya, who hasn't been able to join us, but she's currently a PhD candidate in political science and government at UC Berkeley. And we also had Simran on this project, who is a student of psychology at Claremont McKenna College and has also worked with Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors. She wasn't able to join us as well. But that's our team. And yeah, we can go on to the next slide. So, like I mentioned, CGAP is one of the only organizations working on gender and politics in South Asia. But why have we chosen South Asia? For starters, our volunteers hail from countries like India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and even Maldives, which has allowed us to foster a regional network that provides tailored research and policy recommendations that mostly avoid Western-centric models. Also, according to UN Women, only 14% parliamentary seats in South Asia are held by women, and women remain largely absent from global platforms. Given that nearly 25% of the global population resides in South Asia, we thought this region could use a specialized focus on gender and politics, which is where we come in. You can go on to the next slide. So before we start talking a little bit about our report and give you guys what you joined for, let me introduce the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. This document was adopted during the Fourth World Conference on Women in 1995 and is considered to be one of the most comprehensive documents globally for outlining gender equality. There are 12 critical areas which have been highlighted, and there have been 5 major reviews since 1995, one every 5 years. This year, we saw the 6th review taking place during the 69th Commission on the Status of Women, which took place in March. And that is where our report comes in. So you can go on to the next slide. Grounded in Section G of the Beijing Declaration, we examined the progress made over the last 30 years on women in politics in 8 South Asian countries. We looked at some key parameters like voting rights, electoral representation, quota systems, institutional mechanisms, and legal frameworks that are designed to protect women in politics. The findings that we found were diverse across regions. There were a lot of similarities as well, which I'm going to let the researchers talk about. But yeah, I think the key point to note would be that although there has been a lot of progress in the region, given that a lot of countries in the region are post-colonial nations and have had experience of colonialism, there is a long way to go for us as well. That's all I would say. And yeah, I'm sure everybody is waiting to hear from our researchers now. So let's get into that. Um, could we go on to the next slide, please? So, my first question is basically what motivated you to join this research project? And can I bring Tapakshi in on this one?
Thank you, Ragini. Thank you so much for hosting this, and I'm super excited to be here. I think in terms of what motivated me to join this project was more to just sort of quench my own curiosity in terms of understanding how South Asian countries have fared when it comes to gender equality and politics. I think personally for me, because I am from India, and I guess that creates a comfort zone where you end up becoming familiar with the geography you're in. So this research project allowed me to sort of challenge myself and try to familiarize myself with a completely new terrain, and that way it was just a wonderful experience to like read everything from scratch, learn everything from scratch, and then present something that everybody can consume. So, and I think how CGAP anyway does research is something that I'm a huge fan of. I think there's a lot of collaboration that goes in place. There's, you get to meet people who are doing extremely wonderful when it comes to gender equality, and so you learn from their experiences as well. You learn different styles of writing, different styles of research. So I guess in a nutshell, why would I not want to do something that's intellectually enriching for me? So that's what motivated me to join the project.
That's very kind. That's a very kind answer on your part. Would anyone else like to share their motivations for joining this project very quickly? Okay, we can move on to the next question. Um, so, you guys have all worked on different countries, and I want to ask you, were you able to find data for your country easily? And just take me through the data collection process, your key takeaways, any of that. I'm going to tag Ranjini because I think she's had the most amount of diversity in terms of the countries that she's worked on. So please let us know.
Thank you, Ragni, for that question. I think this is a question that all of us probably would be able to answer with to varying levels. And I think for me, the country that I primarily worked on was Bangladesh, but I also had the privilege of sort of peer reading the entire report and looking at data points for all the other countries. I think a South Asia focus in general for me was very useful because, like the Pakshi mentioned, there is a sense of familiarity with India, and also because we're placed in a similar context in many ways. There's a level of familiarity that you have with other countries as well and other countries' political systems. So it was fascinating for me to see how, as countries, we've influenced each other's systems, even though some of us have unicameral systems, some of us have bicameral systems. So that allows you to contextualize, where are your commonalities, where are your differences. If I had to speak to Bangladesh specifically, I would have to say that the process was easy because, like I said, there was a certain level of familiarity of the system for me, and the fact that we've borrowed from each other a lot as countries, that allows you to understand the data much more faster and easier. I think in terms of data collection processes, it was also easy because Bangladesh, having been led by very influential women in the past, and because of certain developmental indicators of the country, it's always occupied a place of interest for researchers in general. So I was very grateful for finding research insights from reports put up by European Union, for instance. There was a lot of data that was coming from UN bodies and other multinational organizations. Fascinatingly enough, there were a lot of research projects that were put together by researchers from Bangladesh, examining their own local regions to understand how data collection, to understand how elections happen at the local level. So I'm grateful for finding all of that and being able to analyze it in the context of the research that we were doing. I also looked at IPU. It's a global data set on national parliaments where different countries themselves voluntarily contribute data. And IPU formed a very good baseline for me to understand how all countries function across certain parameters that we were looking at, such as voting rights, women caucuses, whether they exist, women speakers, if they, or any other political figures at a national level, if they occupy those places, and so on and so forth. In terms of key takeaways, I think the first key takeaway is that some countries document their political processes much better, and they also have a vibrant, either internationally or nationally, a vibrant, social and civil society assisting him on that. But there are definitely things that countries should be doing to improve their processes, particularly in terms of gender disaggregated data. So that was a bit of a long-winded answer from my side. I hope that was useful. So I'm going to take a pause here and let someone else take over.
No, not at all. I think that was a great answer. And yeah, I think, like you said, you worked on the peer review part as well. So you did get to read the data that has come from the other countries as well. Um, I was wondering if you could share anything about Sri Lanka, because I know you didn't work solely on that. There was somebody else that was working on it, but you did come in, I know. And I, again, because you mentioned about women in leadership in Bangladesh, I know that's the case in Sri Lanka as well. So were there any similarities that you found? Anything that you want to share about Sri Lanka?
Sure. I think the one thing that probably the parallels between Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, besides the fact that powerful, influential women have led the country at different points of time, was that when there have been times of political conflict, or when there have been issues of regional imbalances, data tends to go missing, right? Because that's also a time when countries go through periods of flux, when establishments tend to be very secretive about the data that they're publishing, or when in civil society, whether national or international civil society that work in these countries tend to go silent. So I think those were some interesting bits that had come out. And Bangladesh, of course, continues to remain in a bit of flux. So I'm hoping to see more data coming from there. But specifically for Sri Lanka, I have seen a slight uptick in the way data has been collected in the recent past. Though, of course, while all countries remain at varying levels when it comes to the amount of data they've been collecting and putting out in the public domain, I do think that there are some positives to the way some countries have been performing.
Great. Thank you so much. I think data goes missing during times of crisis is a takeaway that I'm going to keep with myself. That's a very interesting point. Thank you so much. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Can we change? Yeah. So, my next question is if there is any particular finding that stayed with you while you were researching, and if you could share what the finding was. I'm going to tag Rajeshwari on this one.
Thank you so much. See, I worked on Maldives and I also worked on Afghanistan. So Maldives was a very routine kind of a political scenario as far as women were concerned. If you look at South Asian countries, most of them have almost similar kind of behavior when it comes to women political participation. But what stayed with me was Afghanistan. Afghanistan is the whole different story altogether. We have political participation of Afghanistan divided into three eras. So pre 2021, that is before 2001, then 2004 to 2021, and then post 2021. So before 2001, women were completely out of political participation. No no any kind of let's say social indulgence or involvement in anything. Then we had a 2 decades active participation promotion, where we even had a law that was giving them some kind of a reservation. But then post 2021, it's a complete blanket ban. So I think this stayed with me because as you can see, if you do not have any kind of political motivation or any kind of a regime which do not value women in terms of their freedom, education, or other freedoms, political participation is the last thing that would come, because it's even education is banned, everything is banned. So political participation definitely would be a last thing to come. So if women have to do something in Afghanistan, they really have to fight at different levels, and political participation is very small part of that whole ambition. Yes, please.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think um, Afghanistan was definitely one of the most interesting countries to read about. Like, I think with the rest of the countries, there was similarities and differences that you could find. I could say there was a progressive progression that you could see where things were getting, there were setbacks, but things were getting better slowly, one step at a time. Afghanistan, I think the way you presented it as well was very exactly like you mentioned. It was like, there was a surge and it's all gone downhill now. I think what I found really interesting was how there was a section in the report where we also wanted to talk about women who have been leaders and explicitly name them. And it was a little difficult to find for some countries, but for Afghanistan we were able to find so many names of women who had been in public office, which I thought was just one of the most incredible insights given the situation today.
True, because I think the women who had fought for ages to actually get their voice heard, and they had fought the social norms, they have fought the whole system, political system, and somehow they were able to manage things to bring things to a certain extent. And then suddenly they were running for their life. But wherever they are today, in whichever part of the world they are, they're still raising their voice, they're still working towards it. But it's a very, very difficult situation for Afghanistan right now.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the fact that we had data available, the fact that we were able to make it a part of this report has really been a privilege for us, because it has really, I think, enhanced the quality of research that we've been able to do. So we have about 10 minutes left. So I would like to open up the session for questions from the audience. Please feel free to, put in any questions that you want to ask our researchers, anything about the report, if there's any particular country that you would like to know more about. Yeah, please do ask us any questions you may have. I'm just, in the meanwhile, while people, send us some questions, I do have a testimonial from Kamya. So she's not here, but I'm just going to read that out on her behalf. Just give me a second. So Kamya has said, I first became interested in gender and politics research after doing a summer internship at the Center for Social Research in Delhi. I wrote my college thesis on voter bias against women politicians in India, and I'm now doing a PhD where I study women's presence and rise in political parties in urban India. I wanted to work on this research brief because it is important to comparatively document the progress made and further steps to be taken to improve women's political participation and representation. Finding data on gender and politics varied substantially depending on the country, highlighting the need for systematically collecting this data and making it accessible to a wider audience. So, Kamya was working on India and Bhutan, which, I think the kind of data, the quantity of data that she would have found would have definitely varied. So, yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Kamya. Okay, we do have one question. Okay, he says, thank you for the presentation. Anything you could share about how intersectionality, race, caste, etc. was taken into account? Would any of our researchers like to come in on this one?
I can attempt to do justice to this very interesting question. Whoever's asked this question, thank you for that. Um, I think it's a very valid ask, but I don't think our research was able to delve deep into these important questions at the moment. And the reason was that primarily data does not, at least for the countries that I looked at, and overarchingly, when we look at election data, it was very hard when we were focusing on women to find commonalities in some of these things in terms of data availability across all countries. And I think from within, given the scope of our research, the attempt was made to keep things, as, how do I say it, streamlined and as focused on women as a consolidated category. Though absolutely agree with you that intersectionalities exist and these should be adequately represented in data and preferably highlighted in future policy briefs. But at the moment, I think the scope was kept specifically on women and what was available about women's participation in politics as a whole.
Thank you. Thank you, Ranjit.
Ragini,
Yeah,
if I may, I think
go ahead.
just drawing from what even Renji just said, I think this is also one of my takeaways when I was doing my research on Nepal that in addition to not having like adequate gender disaggregated data, there's also a lack of the socially disaggregated data, for the lack of a better term, where you could really understand how different social groups, vulnerable or otherwise, are able to really engage with politics, and then go a step ahead to also then understand how they're able to engage with politics from a gender perspective. So I think that's something that, especially in the South Asian context, is something that can carry a huge amount of weight because I think the democracies in South Asian countries just flourish much better compared to, say, other parts of the world. And I guess that's me being a little biased towards where I'm coming from. But I think, yes, it's high time that, am I going? Sorry. Um, but yeah, I think it's high time that we sort of come up with data points that just don't just say look at men and women in silos, but say take a step ahead and look at people from other gender identities as well, or even other vulnerable social groups, because ultimately everybody is collectively involved in voting, in participating in politics, or just in general existing within the democracy. So if you're not able to really understand their perspectives, I don't think the policies that will then be shaped up would be able to benefit them. If you only take siloed perspectives because of you will create siloed policies, and it's just a constant chain that's happening through and through. I think that's also why even if you look into, say, SDG implementation or anything else, I think that's a big challenge. That the reason why it's not being able to reach its potential is because you're not looking at data from a very wide perspective. Yeah, that was also maybe a challenge that I face with
I would also like to add one more point to this. Since the time frame for which we were conducting this study was 30 years, and intersectionality and data related to intersectionality would be really, really difficult to get for this. So in case we have to go wide, in depth into the intersectionality of women's political participation on basis of, let's say, caste and creed and other parameters, then we'll have to restrict our time frame to a smaller one, and then only we would be able to do that. So that was also one of the reason, because we were primarily seeing the trend from Beijing till today. So there the intersectionality would have actually diluted everything, because data insufficiency would have been very high.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. I think, yeah, that's very well captured. I think, yeah, just to kind of summarize what everyone said, this was also, our brief did cover 8 countries. So it was important for us to find, common indicators to report on. And like everybody has mentioned, there is already a dearth of data in terms of, gender disaggregated data and other types of data that we would need to consider intersectionality in its, entirety. But yeah, I think thank you for the question. That is a very good question. And thank you for answering so well to everyone else. We have a comment as well that says, very insightful session, interesting to hear directly from the researchers. Thank you. I agree. The researchers are very competent. I am enjoying listening to them as well. Thank you. Thank you so much. Do you have any question for the researchers? Again, even if it's about the research process, not directly about the report. You have them right here. I'm just going to take a second to also drop the link to our report. Yeah. If there are no more questions, then we can start wrapping up. Um, I'm just going to do one final call. If there's any questions, anything at all, please send it in. You can also write into us always. We will definitely like to answer any questions, but you have us all right here. Please feel free to ask. All right. Well, thank you so much for attending this live, and thank you so much to Tapakshi, Ranjini, Rajeshwari for joining me in presenting our work. Yes, I think this has been a great session. This has been a great learning for me as well. Do join our community and stay in touch with our projects, stay abreast with what we're doing at CGAP. Do contribute as well if you would like. There is a lot of research that we are doing currently, and if you join the community, you should be able to find out how to contribute. We are constantly putting out calls. Yeah, and do read our report and send us in any thoughts that you may have. Okay, we have one comment. Okay, thanks for this session. Coming just out of college and having little knowledge about it, I would love to know about the development of women leadership in Sri Lanka. That's a great question, but I don't think we can do justice to it in 1 minute. So I'm going to, I think, Aman, if you could write into us on LinkedIn, I will connect you to Ranjini, who's worked specifically on Sri Lanka. But yes, the rest of us can also try and answer your question. Thank you so much for sending that across. And yeah, that's that for this session. Thank you so much. Any closing thoughts from the researchers? Anything you'd like to share as we sign off?
I think I'll just take the moment to thank you, Akhil, and the entire CGAP team for organizing this wonderful event. I think it's great that we get a chance to really talk about something that we're passionate about and to spread our opinions and insights like this. So looking forward to collaborating more like this and creating more research.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tapakshi.
Absolutely second that. Thank you so much for leading us in this project also, Ragini. It was a pleasure to work with all of the researchers on this project. But I think the fact that CGAP exists and that it encourages volunteer-based contributions, which in a way I think speaks to the fact that women should lead women, and there should be a contribution towards the process through data and research. I think that's really great. So really resonate with that mission and hope to contribute more in the future.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anjani.
Thank you so much, Anjani.
I would just like to say, looking at all the work that is being done, looking at the discussions that take place, the dialogue that is opening up because of CGAP, I'm hopeful that in future we would be conducting research about youngsters' participation and how they become so ambitious to become politicians. That is what I dream of researching someday. Because today, what I feel is women miss leadership ambitions. Especially young girls, they miss leadership ambitions, and political leadership also is part of that leadership ambition, which we do not have too many role models. But I think someday we would be researching about why young girls are so ambitious about becoming politicians. Till then, we'll continue working like this.
Thank you so much. I think you've just given us a great research question. I think I need to message Akhil and Sugandha after this. We have to start working on the next research brief. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining.
And yeah, hope to see you all soon.
Hope to see you all soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye. Thanks, everyone.